The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly was the largest structure ever built by living beings. It floated in the empty space between three dying stars, a monument to the power of the species who ruled this part of the galaxy. The Dominion had constructed it 12,000 years ago, when humanity was still learning to plant seeds in dirt. Admiral stood at the center of this impossible place, feeling very small. She was 57 years old with streaks running through her black hair. Her uniform was simple navy blue without decoration or medals. Around her, hundreds of alien delegates sat in floating chairs that circled upward into darkness. Their bodies came in every shape she could imagine and many she could not. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had no solid form at all. All of them were looking at her, with something between curiosity and amusement. The High Speaker sat on a throne of black crystal at the highest point of the chamber. His name was, and his species had ruled the Orion Arm since before Earth's dinosaurs died. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and 4 arms that ended in delicate fingers. His eyes were completely white, without pupils, and they stared down at like she was an insect that had wandered into a palace. "You may speak human," said. His voice echoed through the chamber, translated into 100 languages by technology humanity could not understand. Took a breath. She had practiced this speech for months. Earth's future depended on the next few minutes. "High Speaker, honored delegates," she began. "Humanity comes before this assembly with a simple request. We ask for trade rights in the neutral corridor. We offer fair exchange of goods and knowledge. We seek only peaceful cooperation with our galactic neighbors." She paused, waiting for a response. The laughter started slowly. A few delegates at first, then more, until the entire chamber was filled with the sound of alien amusement. Stood perfectly still, her face showing nothing. Raised one of his 4 hands, and the laughter stopped. "How long has your species existed?" he asked. His tone was patient, like an adult speaking to a very stupid child. "Approximately 300,000 years in our current form," replied, "though we have only developed space travel in the last." 300,000 years, interrupted her with a soft clicking sound that might have been a laugh. "My species was charting the death of stars when yours was learning to stand upright. We mapped 1,000 galaxies while you were drawing pictures on cave walls." More laughter from the assembly. "The Dominion," continued, "has conquered 400 species. We have destroyed suns that displeased us. We have reshaped planets to match our desires." He leaned forward on his throne. "And you come here, little creature from a single muddy world, asking us for trade rights." His voice remained steady. "We offer fair exchange, nothing more." "You offer nothing because you are nothing." His white eyes seemed to glow. "Your species is a curiosity, a brief flash of noise in an ancient universe. You send your radio signals into space like children shouting in the dark, not understanding that the dark is full of things that eat children." The assembly laughed again. "We have watched your world," said. "We have listened to your broadcasts, your music, your wars, your petty conflicts over invisible lines in the dirt." He made the clicking sound again. "You are entertainment, human, nothing more. You are the comedy show we watch when we are bored." Said nothing. "Return to your single world," declared. "Play with your primitive rockets. Build your little ships and pretend you matter. The Dominion has no use for pets." The laughter this time was thunderous. Hundreds of alien voices joined together in mockery. Some of the delegates were making gestures that recognized as obscene in their cultures. Others were simply staring at her with open contempt. One delegate, a creature made of living fire, floated closer to her. "How does it feel," the creature asked, "to know that your entire species is a joke?" Looked at the creature for a long moment. Then slowly she bowed. It was a deep bow, the kind that showed respect in human culture. The aliens saw submission. They saw defeat. They saw exactly what they expected to see. They did not see her hand move to the small device hidden in her sleeve. The signal was simple, just a single encrypted pulse, traveling at the speed of light toward a small blue world on the edge of the galaxy. It contained no words, no complex message, just a code that had been prepared 40 years ago, during a time when humanity first learned it was not alone in the universe. Straightened from her bow, her face was calm. "I thank the High Speaker for his wisdom," she said. "I will return to my people and share your words with them." Waved one of his hands dismissively. "See that you do, and tell them to stop sending those radio signals. The noise is annoying." More laughter. Walked out of the chamber with slow, measured steps. The doors closed behind her, cutting off the sound of alien amusement. She stood in the empty corridor for a moment, alone in the silence. Then she smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just set something terrible in motion, something that could not be stopped. Her communicator buzzed. A text message appeared on the screen, sent from Earth through a network of hidden relay stations that they did not know existed. "Signal received. Protocol Omega confirmed. The sleepers are waking." Read the message twice, then she deleted it. 40 years ago, when humanity had first detected signs of alien life in the galaxy, the world's governments had gathered in secret. They had asked a simple question: what if the universe is not friendly? The answer had taken 4 decades to build. It was hidden in asteroid fields and buried beneath lunar craters. It existed on no official record, in no public database. Only a handful of people on Earth knew about it. The Dominion believed humanity had 200 ships, small vessels with primitive weapons, barely capable of defending a single solar system. They were wrong. On the journey back to Earth, stood at the window of her transport ship and looked out at the stars. She thought about her daughter, who was 7 years old and loved to look at the night sky. She thought about the 30 million humans who lived on colony worlds throughout the neutral corridor. She thought about and their ancient empire and their absolute certainty that humanity was nothing. She did not feel angry. Anger was too small a word for what she felt. "You think we are children," she whispered to the stars. "You think we are weak. You think we will accept your contempt and do nothing." The stars did not answer. They never did. "You are going to learn," said softly, "what humanity does when we have no choice left. You are going to learn what sleeps beneath our smiles." Back in the assembly chamber, High Speaker was accepting congratulations from his advisors. They were pleased with how he had handled the human. They were amused by her strange bow, her quiet voice, her simple uniform. None of them noticed the small device that had been left behind, hidden in the shadows near the door. It was recording everything, every word, every laugh, every gesture of contempt. In 3 months, that recording would be played on every screen on Earth. And everything would change. The colony on 442b had been humanity's proudest achievement. It was the first world beyond Earth where humans could breathe the air and drink the water without machines. 30,000 people lived there, in small cities built between forests of alien trees that glowed blue at night. Captain was 3 days away when the distress signal came. He was 34 years old, young for his rank. His face was thin and sharp, with dark eyes that rarely showed emotion. He commanded the UENS Vengeance, a patrol vessel assigned to the outer edges of human space. It was a small ship with a crew of 47. They spent most of their time scanning empty space and watching for pirates. "Captain," Lieutenant said from her station. Her voice was strange. "We are receiving an emergency broadcast from 442b. Looked up from his reports. Was 28, with short black hair and quick hands that moved across her controls like a musician playing an instrument. In the 2 years she had served under him, he had never heard her voice shake. It was shaking now. "Put it through," he said. The bridge speakers filled with screaming. Behind the human voices there was another sound, a low, rhythmic hum that recognized from his training. Weapons. The message was broken, cutting in and out. Attack without warning, ships everywhere. They're targeting the schools. Please someone, anyone. My children are. Static. Silence. His hands tightened on his armrest until his knuckles turned white. Maximum speed to 442B, he said. His voice was flat, empty. Now. The vengeance arrived too late. There was no colony left to save. Where cities had stood, there were only craters. The blue forests were burning, filling the atmosphere with smoke. Bodies floated in orbit, thousands of them, some still wearing the clothes they had died in. Saw a small shape tumble past his viewport. A child, maybe 6 years old, still holding a stuffed animal. Sir whispered. She was crying. She did not seem to notice. Broadcast on open channels, they are celebrating. Let me hear it. The alien voices filled the bridge. Did not understand their language, but the translation software did. The vermin have been cleansed, a voice said. The human infestation on this world has been removed. Let this be a message to their pathetic species. Laughter, that same cold, clicking laughter that had heard in the assembly chamber. How many did we kill? Another voice asked. 30,000, including several thousand young ones. Excellent, the young ones screamed the loudest. More laughter. Sat very still. His crew watched him, waiting for orders. Some of them were crying. Some were staring at their screens with empty eyes. One officer had vomited on the floor. Record everything, said finally. Every word, every laugh, every second of their celebration. His hands moved across her controls. Yes, sir, and then looked out at the debris field that had once been a human colony. He looked at the bodies of children floating in the void. He looked at the ships in the distance, their lights blinking in celebration. Then we go home, he said. Earth needs to see what they think of us. The journey back to Earth took 2 weeks. Did not sleep for most of it. He sat in his cabin, watching the recording over and over. He memorized every voice, every word, every moment of alien laughter. When he finally arrived on Earth, he found that the news had already spread. Admiral had received the distress signal through official channels. She had requested a meeting with the United Nations Security Council. When ship landed, she was waiting for him at the dock. Captain, she said, you're recording. He handed her the data chip without a word. That night, the recording played on every screen in every city on every continent. It played in homes and offices and schools. It played in hospitals and prisons and military bases. 7 billion people watched and listened as alien voices celebrated the murder of 30,000 humans. The reaction was immediate. In Seoul, a crowd of 100,000 people gathered in silence. They did not shout or wave signs. They simply stood, watching the recording play on giant screens, their faces lit by alien laughter. In New York, the United Nations building was surrounded by military vehicles. Inside, the Security Council met in emergency session. The meeting lasted 6 hours. When it ended, Defense Minister walked out to face the cameras. She was 63 years old. She had survived 3 wars and buried 2 children. Her hair was completely, her face lined with decades of difficult decisions. She stood at the podium and looked into the cameras, and something in her eyes made the reporters step back. The Dominion, she said, has released an official statement regarding the attack on 442B. They call it a regrettable navigation error. They express mild concern that their merchant ships accidentally destroyed one of our colonies. She paused. 30,000 of our people are dead. 12,000 of them were children, and they call it an accident. Her voice was steady, but there was steel beneath it. We have asked the Galactic Assembly for justice. They have refused to hear our case. We have asked for compensation for the families. They have laughed at us. We have asked for the commanders responsible to face trial. She held up a document. This is their response, a formal suggestion that humanity accept our place in the galaxy as a minor species of limited significance, a recommendation that we avoid further embarrassment by staying inside our own solar system. Set the document on fire. She dropped it on the floor and watched it burn. They believe we are weak, she said. They believe we will accept this. They believe that humanity kneels. She looked directly into the camera. Shall we show them what humanity does instead? Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a facility that existed on no map, Admiral walked through corridors of cold metal and flickering lights. She had not slept in 3 days. She had not eaten in 2, but she was smiling. The door at the end of the corridor required 3 different security codes and a DNA scan. It opened slowly, revealing a room filled with screens and blinking lights and officers who had spent their entire careers preparing for this moment. Admiral, one of them said, "Protocol Omega is authorized." The council vote was unanimous. Nodded, she walked to the central console and placed her hand on a red switch that had never been touched. "Begin wake-up sequence," she said. All around the solar system, in places that no satellite had ever photographed, machines that had been sleeping for 40 years began to stir. Engines that had never fired started to warm. Weapons that had never been tested began to charge. The Apocalypse fleet was waking up. And the Dominion had no idea what was coming. The Dominion knew about humanity's official navy. Their spies had counted every ship, measured every weapon, analyzed every capability. 200 vessels, they reported, small ships with basic weapons, a defensive force barely capable of protecting a single solar system. The military commanders looked at these reports and felt nothing but contempt. Their own fleet numbered in the millions. A single battleship could destroy Earth's entire navy in an afternoon. What they did not know about was Protocol Omega. Commander had spent 20 years in the black sites, the secret facilities that existed in the gaps between official records. She was 53 years old, with hair cut short and eyes that had seen things she could never talk about. Her hands had built weapons that were designed to end civilizations. She stood on the bridge of the UENS Extinction, flagship of the Apocalypse fleet, and watched as ships that should not exist came alive all around her. "Status report," she said. Her executive officer, Commander Minu, checked his screens. He was 45, with a calm face and steady hands. He had volunteered for this assignment knowing he would probably never see his family again. 312 vessels now active, he said. Weapons systems online, crews reporting ready. That is less than half the fleet. The rest are still warming up. Some of these ships have been sleeping for 30 years. Nodded, she had expected this. You could not hide 700 warships in asteroid fields and lunar craters and expect them all to work perfectly. 700 ships. That was the true size of humanity's hidden fleet. Not 200. 700 built in secret over 4 decades, designed for a war that everyone had hoped would never come. The ships were not beautiful. They were not meant to be. They were weapons, pure and simple. Their hulls were covered in layers of armor that could absorb nuclear explosions. Their engines burned fuel that humanity had created by studying crashed alien vessels. Their weapons. Did not like to think about the weapons. Singularity bombs that could create miniature black holes, swallowing everything within 1,000 kilometers. Dimensional shear cannons that tore holes in the fabric of space itself. Plague vectors designed to target specific alien biologies, killing one species while leaving all others untouched. Humanity had hoped never to use these things, but humanity had also learned a long time ago that hope was not a strategy. "Commander," Lieutenant said from the communication station. She was young, only 26, one of the few crew members who had not spent decades in the black sites. "Incoming transmission from Earth. Admiral." "Put it through." face appeared on the main screen. She looked tired. She looked old, but her eyes were sharp and clear. "Commander," she said, "you understand what happens when we deploy." "Yes, Admiral. We stop being the species that asks for permission. And we become the species that takes what it needs." Paused. "The Council has approved full deployment, every ship, every weapon. We are not going to negotiate. We are not going to demand justice. We are going to show the galaxy what happens when you push humanity too far." Nodded slowly. "The primary target. Their defense grid is legendary. They have weapons platforms, guardian vessels, orbital fortresses. They believe it is impossible to attack them directly." "They believe wrong." His expression softened slightly. "Some of these weapons, once we use them, there is no going back. The galaxy will never look at us the same way again." "Good." His voice was hard. "I want them to look at us differently. I want every species in this galaxy to understand that humanity is not prey. We are not victims. We are not entertainment. What are we?" Looked at the screen, at the woman who had stood alone in an alien chamber and accepted mockery without flinching. "We are the answer to a question they should never have asked. They wanted to know what would happen if they pushed us. Now they find out." Nodded once. "May whatever gods exist forgive us." "With respect, Admiral, I would rather they fear us." The transmission ended. Around the extinction, the Apocalypse fleet continued to gather. Ships emerged from asteroid fields where they had hidden for decades. Vessels rose from beneath lunar dust, shaking off the disguises that had made them invisible to alien scanners. Some came from places even further away, from facilities buried in the ice of distant moons and the clouds of gas giants. Watched them arrive, one by one, then 10 by 10, then 100 by 100. She had spent half her life preparing for this moment. She had sacrificed everything, a normal career, a family, a life in the light, to be ready for this day. And now that day had come. "Commander," Minu said, "fleet strength now at 640 vessels, all systems operational, jump drives charged. The remaining ships. Another 3 days to full activation." Shook her head. "We do not have 3 days. The may discover what we are doing. We go now with what we have." She walked to the center of the bridge and looked at her crew. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were the secret keepers, the shadow workers, the men and women who had given their lives to a mission that most of humanity did not even know existed. "You all know why we are here," she said. "You all know what was done to our people on 442B. 30,000 dead, 12,000 children, and the laughed." Her crew was silent. "Today the laughing stops. Today we show the galaxy that humanity is not a joke. We are not a minor species. We are not prey." She paused. "Today we are the predator." She turned to face the main screen, which showed a star chart with the at the center. "All ships prepare for jump, destination prime." Her voice was cold and steady. "We have waited 40 years for this moment. Let us make it count." The Apocalypse fleet activated their jump drives. Space folded around them, bending in ways that alien scientists would have said was impossible for human technology. In an instant, 640 warships vanished from the solar system. They reappeared in space. And the galaxy would never be the same again. They had not faced invasion in 8,000 years. The last species to try had been the Empire, a civilization of warriors who had conquered half a galaxy. Their fleet had numbered 2 million ships. The defense grid had destroyed them in a single day. Since then, no one had even considered attacking Prime. The defense grid was not just powerful, it was legendary. Thousands of weapons platforms circled the planet. Hundreds of guardian vessels patrolled every approach. Orbital fortresses, each one the size of a small moon, watched over the space lanes with weapons that could crack planets. High Speaker stood in his palace and felt perfectly safe. He was reviewing reports from the Galactic Assembly when his advisor rushed into the room. Was young for only 300 years old, and his pale blue skin had turned almost white. High Speaker said, "There is a problem." Did not look up from his reports. What kind of problem? Ships, human ships. They have appeared in our outer system. Made the clicking sound that passed for laughter among his species. Human ships, those primitive vessels. Our patrols will destroy them within the hour. High Speaker's voice was shaking. There are more than 600 of them. Now looked up. That is impossible. Human military intelligence reports that their entire fleet is 200 vessels. I know what the reports say. I am telling you what our sensors show. Walk to the window and point it at the sky. Look for yourself. Walked to the window. At first he saw nothing unusual. The familiar stars of the gentle glow of the orbital platforms, the distant lights of trading ships. Then he noticed something strange. Some of the stars were moving. They were not stars. Impossible, he whispered. The human ships filled the sky. They were not the small, primitive vessels that intelligence had reported. These were warships, massive and dark, with hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their engines burned with a cold blue fire that did not recognize. And there were so many of them. Where did they hide this? Asked. His voice sounded strange even to himself. How did we not know? We do not know. We are trying to contact our intelligence networks, but there is no response. It is as if these ships did not exist until today. An alarm began to sound throughout the palace. Red lights flashed. Voices shouted orders. The entire planet was waking up to the impossible sight in their sky. On the bridge of the extinction, Commander watched the defense grid activate. Weapons platforms powered up. Guardian vessels moved into formation. Orbital fortresses began tracking her fleet. Enemy defenses coming online, Lieutenant reported. Estimate full activation in 4 minutes. That is 3 minutes too long for them. Turned to her weapons officer, Lieutenant. He was 30 years old with strong hands and quiet eyes. He had spent his entire career training to fire weapons that were never supposed to exist. Open a channel to the planet. Channel open. Stood in the center of her bridge and faced the screen. High Council, this is Commander of the United Earth Navy, Apocalypse Fleet. You have 1 standard hour to surrender unconditionally and present the commanders responsible for the 442B massacre. Failure to comply will result in planetary sterilization. She paused, letting the words sink in. We are not negotiating, we are informing. The response came quickly. High Speaker appeared on the screen, his white eyes glowing with anger. You dare threaten the Dominion, he demanded. Your species is nothing. You are insects. You are dust. We will destroy your fleet and burn your planet and scatter your ashes across the galaxy. Listened to this without expression. When finished, she simply nodded. I see you have chosen poorly. She turned to target their orbital defense command, fire. Pressed a single button. The Extinction's main weapon was a singularity cannon. It fired a compressed point of infinite gravity, a miniature black hole that existed for exactly 3 seconds before collapsing. No species in the galaxy had ever built such a weapon. The physics should have been impossible. Humanity had done it anyway. The singularity shot across the sky like a tear in reality itself. Light bent around it. Space twisted in its wake. It struck the massive station at the heart of the defense network and simply swallowed it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the station collapsed inward, folding into a point smaller than an atom, dragging debris and nearby vessels with it. Ships that had served the Dominion for thousands of years disappeared into the singularity like water into a drain. When the singularity collapsed, it exploded. The flash was visible from the planet's surface. A second sun appeared in the sky, then faded, leaving nothing but empty space where the defense command had been. 50,000 died in that instant. On the planet below, watched with his mouth open. He could not speak. He could not move. He had just seen his legendary defense grid, the shield that had protected his people for 8,000 years, torn apart in seconds. 53 minutes remaining, announced. Her voice was calm, almost bored. Choose. The battle lasted 11 minutes. They threw everything they had at the human fleet. Weapons platforms fired beams of energy that could melt asteroids. Guardian vessels launched swarms of missiles that could track targets across solar systems. Orbital fortresses unleashed weapons that had destroyed civilizations. The Apocalypse fleet barely noticed. Human ships moved through the defenses like ghosts. Their armor absorbed attacks that should have vaporized them. Their weapons cut through enemy vessels without slowing. Every time a ship exploded, 2 more human ships appeared to take its place in the assault. It was not a battle, it was a demonstration. Commander watched the destruction from her bridge, her face showing nothing. She had spent 20 years preparing for this moment. She had studied tactics, analyzed their weapons, learned their weaknesses. She had designed the Apocalypse fleet specifically to destroy them. And now she was doing exactly that. Enemy fleet reduced by 70%, Minu reported. Orbital defenses at 12% capacity. Guardian vessels in full retreat. Continue the assault. I want their defenses completely eliminated before we begin ground operations. Commander looked up from her station. The high speaker is requesting communication. Smiled, it was not a pleasant smile. Put him through. Appeared on the screen. He looked different now. The arrogance was gone. The contempt was gone. His white eyes were wide with something that recognized very well. Fear. Stop, said, please stop. You have 41 minutes remaining. Do you surrender? His voice cracked. I surrender. The Dominion surrenders. Please just stop. Nodded slowly. Cease fire. Around her, the Apocalypse fleet stopped shooting. The silence was sudden and complete. In orbit around Prime, the wreckage of 1,000 ships drifted through space. You have 1 hour to present the commanders responsible for 442B, said. Do not make me wait. She ended the transmission and turned to face her crew. They were staring at her with expressions she could not read. We have won, she said quietly. But this is only the beginning. Now we have to show them who we are going to be. Outside her viewport, they waited. For 8,000 years, it had been the center of an empire that stretched across the stars. Now it belonged to humanity. And the galaxy was watching. The surrender took place in the same chamber where Admiral had been mocked 3 months earlier. The obsidian throne still floated at the highest point of the room. The crystal walls still glittered with ancient light, but everything else had changed. High Speaker knelt on the cold floor where had once stood. His jeweled robes were gone, replaced by simple cloth. His 4 arms were bound behind his back. His white eyes stared at the ground. Around him, the delegates of the Galactic Assembly sat in their floating chairs, watching in absolute silence. They had come to witness the end of an era. For 12,000 years, the Dominion had ruled this part of the galaxy. Now, in the span of a single day, that rule had ended. Admiral walked into the chamber with slow, measured steps. Her uniform was still simple navy blue, without decoration. Her black hair was still streaked with. She looked exactly the same as she had during her first visit. But everything about her felt different now. She stopped in front of and looked down at him. She did not speak for a long moment. The silence stretched out until it became uncomfortable. Some of the delegates shifted in their chairs. Others looked away. Finally spoke. The humans we killed, he said. His voice was barely a whisper. We thought, we believed. You believed we were primitive. His voice was ice. You believed we were harmless. You believed we would not respond. Yes. You were correct about none of these things. Raised his head slightly. His white eyes were dull, empty of the arrogance that had filled them before. What do you want from us? Reached into her uniform and pulled out a small data pad. She held it up so could see the screen. This is a list of the commanders responsible for the attack on 442B, she said. 27 individuals. They will stand trial under human law. If found guilty, they will be executed. Nodded slowly, and if I refuse, then we will find them ourselves, and we will not be gentle about it. I will not refuse. Continued. The Dominion will pay reparations to the families of every victim. 30,000 payments, one for each life you took. The amount will be determined by human accountants based on the lifetime earnings each person would have generated. That will be considerable. Yes, it will be. Put the data pad away. Finally, the Galactic Assembly will formally recognize humanity's claim to the neutral corridor and all territories within 50 light-years of Earth. His eyes widened. That is a quarter of the Dominion's holdings. Consider it a lesson, turned slightly, addressing the other delegates in the chamber. And let this be a message to everyone watching. Humanity did not want this war. We did not seek conflict. We asked for peace and we were mocked. We asked for justice and we were laughed at. We asked for basic respect and we were told we were nothing. Her voice hardened. We are not nothing. We are not entertainment. We are not a minor species of limited significance. We are humanity, and we do not forgive. We do not forget. She looked back at. You asked what humanity could offer you. Let me answer now. We offer you a choice. Peace and prosperity as equals or extinction as enemies. The decision is yours. She paused. But you only get to make it once. The chamber was silent. Not a single delegate spoke, not a single being moved. Lowered his head. We choose peace. Good, nodded to the guards standing nearby. Take him away. The trials will begin next week. As was led out of the chamber, remained standing at the center of the room. The delegates watched her, waiting to see what she would do next. Some of them were afraid. Some were curious. Some were calculating, already thinking about how this new balance of power would affect their own species. Looked at each of them in turn. Let me be clear about something, she said. The fleet you saw today represents only a fraction of humanity's true capabilities. We have weapons you have not seen. We have ships you have not counted. We have been preparing for this moment for 40 years. She smiled. It was not a warm smile. We hoped we would never have to use any of it. We hoped the galaxy would accept us as equals. We hoped we could live in peace. The smile faded. But we learned a long time ago that hope is not a strategy, so we prepared for the worst, and when the worst came, we were ready. She began walking toward the exit. Do not make us demonstrate again. The next time will be worse. She left the chamber without looking back. 5 years later, the peace had held. The Dominion, once the most powerful empire in the Orion Arm, had become humanity's closest ally. Their fleets patrolled the borders together. Their scientists shared research. Their cultures exchanged art and music and stories. High Speaker, no longer a prisoner but no longer truly free, met with Admiral once a year. They would sit together in a small room and talk about the past and the future. It was strange, this relationship between the conqueror and the conquered. Neither of them quite understood it. During one of these meetings, asked a question that had been bothering him for years. The signal, he said. The day we mocked you in the assembly, you sent a signal back to Earth. What did it mean? Looked at him for a long moment. She was older now, her hair completely, her face lined with age and responsibility. But her eyes were still sharp. It was a human phrase, she said. Very old, very simple. What phrase? There is no exact translation in your language, but the meaning is something like this. If you choose to create problems, you should be prepared to face the results. frowned. That does not sound like a military code. Laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I'd ever heard from her. It was not a military code. It was a warning, a reminder of who we are and what we do when we are pushed too far. And what is that? Stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars glittered in the eternal darkness. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled the borders of an empire that had once been unimaginable. "We are survivors," she said quietly. "We crawled out of the mud and learned to walk. We looked at fire and learned to use it. We looked at the sky and learned to fly. Every time the universe told us we could not do something, we found a way to do it anyway." She turned back to face him. "You thought we were weak because we were young, but our youth is our strength. We have not had 12,000 years to grow comfortable. We have not had 8,000 years of safety. We have fought for every moment of our existence." She walked toward the door. That is what the signal meant. It meant that humanity was done asking for permission. It meant that we were ready to take our place in the galaxy, and it meant that anyone who stood in our way would regret it. Watched her leave. He sat alone in the small room for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened, thinking about the mockery and the massacre and the war that had followed, thinking about the price his people had paid for their arrogance. And slowly, despite everything, he began to laugh. It was not the cold, clicking laughter of the old Dominion. It was something new, something that sounded almost like respect. Outside the window, the stars continued to shine, and among them humanity's ships kept watch, silent and patient and ready. Always ready. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and the lesson was simple. Humanity was here to stay.